grateful for the invitation to say a few words at this important meeting of Scottish CND as to how we approach the situation we are now in and how we can move forward to what we all wish, which is the end of nuclear weapons in this country and across the world. Isabel said, I'm perhaps not representative of the Labour Party, well, I'm not the official representative, but I think I'm representative of those MPs in the former Parliament, Labour MPs, Scottish Labour MPs, the majority of whom voted against, I'm proud to say, any renewal of the Trident defence, so-called defence system. I'm also glad to ally myself with all of the colleagues at the top table, but especially with the STUC, because I take the STUC's position and the union's position in this, and that is a position NEMCON against Trident renewal, and I think we should be very proud of the trade union movement in Scotland for taking what was the correct position. I've always been convinced since I was 19, which ate yesterday, that the Trident won in any Trident renewal and any nuclear weapons were morally, militarily and economically repugnant, and that there was no logic or case to be made for them in any of those areas. And as far back as, when was it? 1989, at an Inverness conference, I had the pleasure of seconding the TNG when it moved successfully in policy against the first tranche of Trident, and that's still Scottish Labour Party policy, and I'm pleased to say that as well. However, reality is, of course, that we have to convince our colleagues, political colleagues across the Westminster Parliament, that they should not vote for the initial gate, that they should refuse to develop the Trident renewal programme. I think you can make a case that will persuade some people on the basis of morality that it is immoral to develop, possess and especially use such weapons, and that will convince some folk. You can say that militarily it is a nonsense because, you know, who is it deterring? Will it deter a suicide bomber? No, it will not. Will it deter individual acts of terrorism? No, it will not. Who do we point it towards? It's no longer a Soviet Union. I never believed that nonsense anyway, that suddenly there was going to be a Soviet invasion of Western Europe, but at least there was a kind of logic to that argument about deterrence. So it doesn't work militarily in terms of any kind of logical, coherent military strategy. And many senior military people have come out and said so. They said that it would be useless. They said that we shouldn't be wasting our time and money and resources on developing something like the new Trident. How do we, and you know, I suppose that will persuade some people, but how do we persuade the majority? It's going to be difficult, but I do think, given that this is an age of, a brand new age of coalition, hasn't been a coalition like this, Robert, has there since about the 1920s, not that either of you I remember that, but because the coalition of 1940 was a different kind of coalition, we were fighting fascism, so it wasn't really a political coalition, it was a national coalition. So how do we do it? Well, I think one approach is to build, obviously, a coalition of interests. What would be that interest? It would be people's economic interest. It would be saying to MPs, why are you even contemplating supporting Trident renewal when there are £6 billion of cuts heading for the public sector? That is not in the interest of your constituents. And we should also be saying to people, look, say to your MP that you do not want something which is absolutely useless to you, which does not make your life better, which certainly does not make your world safer, you have to say to them, you have to lobby your MPs and say, do not support the initial gate. Now, I think John Ainsley is absolutely right when he said in his excellent presentation that there are 5 things that we should be looking at. Obviously, we have to argue for the broad coalition, and that's always been CND policy. But I think the moral case is a good case, the military case is a good case, but I think perhaps the emphasis, not solely, but the emphasis should be on economic self-interest and enlightened self-interest. So continue to build that broad coalition. I also think that we should be asking people to say to their MPs, don't have a strategic defence review that doesn't include Trident, because that is simply not sustainable. If you are going to spend, or thinking about spending between, the estimate is between 76 billion and 100 billion pounds, you have to have that in any coherent strategic defence review. And we must also lobby, especially our Lib Dem colleagues, ask them to lobby their senior partners in government at Westminster to delay the initial gate decision, to give us time to spread that message, to give us time to agitate, to propagandise within our community groups, within our constituencies, within our trade unions, across all of Scotland's communities, and of course the communities in the wider UK, because the wider UK has an interest in not having Trident renewal. The Lib Dems are actually they have always been important, don't get me wrong, Robert, but they are very important indeed in this process, because they have to consider how they move forward and maintain what has always been the Liberal Democrat stance, as far as I understand it, that now is not the time, if there ever is a time, I don't think there is, but now is not the time for Trident renewal. So that is very important indeed, and I'll be looking forward to listening to Robert. I always do in the Justice Committee, and I hope he does justice to this subject. I'm sure he will. We need them to publish the costs, because sometimes people say, well, you say it's 76 billion, somebody says it's 50 billion, somebody says 100 billion. Publish the costs. Do people really want what the establishment say, are scarce resources expended in this way? I don't think so. I think we have to get to the situation where we have a political, a small p programme, which engages with the widest possible constituency across the public of across the UK. And we have to persuade people that this is not in their interest. Let's not kid ourselves, colleagues. We know that there are opinion polls after opinion polls that say that people are against Trident renewal. And I'm not saying these are false opinion polls, but it's rather like the psephologists say, it's a pretty soft vote. Are you against something that is obviously illogical and evil? People will say, by and large, yes. But in order to firm that up, in order to take the argument forward that says, do not believe whatever political party that comes across with the so-called argument that we have to have this just in case, we have to make our case. We have to say it is not in your interest, it will not make this world safer, and we should be talking about more socially useful products that would actually make people's lives better and would lead to a better world. And that's the object, isn't it, Chair? I hope that's represented enough, Chair. Thanks very much.